Could Frieza take over Viltrum? Absolutely. No difficulty. Because if Mark Grayson isn't even getting past the Saiyan saga, everybody in the Frieza saga is OP compared to that. So everybody's power level is way above Vegeta's. So Kui has an 18,000 when Vegeta was on Earth. So yeah, it only goes up from there.
We going higher and higher, higher, until we on top.
So they say Kui wasn't really elite, but they used to make fun of him. So it's not going to be too hard for Frieza to take him over.
Let's say Invincible's planet Viltrum existed in Dragon Ball. Could Frieza take over the planet?
Absolutely.
So, what would happen with Viltrum under his control? Could they eventually have an uprising, or are they doomed to be his warriors forever? The answer might sound obvious, but it's more complicated than you think. This video will work twofold. It will be part power scaling, but also part what if. We want to see how strong the Viltrumites are, and if they could fend off this invasion, and what would follow after that. But also, how would they operate under Frieza's rule?
I said, I would think that Frieza would use... If I had to choose or take a guess, Frieza would actually use the Viltrums to replace the Saiyans because the Viltrums are more loyal or they bow down to power more. Nobody would even touch Frieza at this point. Even though the Saiyans are very, very prideful and so are the Viltrums, I think the Viltrums wouldn't mind bowing down to Frieza. And they probably wouldn't be able to escape his rule anyways because there's no Zenkai boost, there's no Super Saiyan, so it would be very easy for Frieza to replace the Saiyans with the Viltrumites. Or he can have them both and have a dual thing and have two planets being taken over. But I would just use the Viltrums.
They are taken over. To start, Viltrum has 50 remaining members at the start of Invincible. So the big question for this hypothetical is, what time frame are we using? We're going to use the population of the 50 strongest. Considering Frieza's a businessman and an opportunist, this would be the best time to strike. It makes it easier to take over and makes the Viltrumites easier to control. Just like the Saiyans, he wanted them all dead, but he won't mind a few in his army. This will be a pre-Invincible Viltrum and a pre-Saiyan Saga Frieza force. We're also going to exclude Mark.
It says pre-Invincible... Okay, pre-Invincible Viltrum and a pre-Saiyan Saga...
here, so I guess Invincible Viltrum and a pre-Saiyan Saga Frieza force. We're also going to exclude Mark.
Okay, a pre-Saiyan Saga Frieza force still has Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz on there, and Mark Grayson wasn't even scaling to them, so let's just see.
Here, so I guess we could use a time where Nolan hasn't gone to Earth yet and become Omni-man or had a kid. But Nolan will be a part of this group. First off, how strong are the Viltrumites? Well, these remaining 50 are the strongest, but some are stronger than others. We don't need to scale each of them in depth, and some of them can't even be scaled as accurately because they have less feats. Though I think the common consensus is that all the remaining Viltrumites fall in the small planetary range, just on varying ends of it. It's pretty easy to come to that conclusion because, well, we have a feat of 3 of them destroying a planet that's around Earth's size, after it had been destabilized. Mark, Nolan, and Thetis. So, it wouldn't make them fully planetary, but just below that.
I was actually told by someone in the comments that the only reason that the Earth was destroyed by Mark, Nolan, and Thrag was because the space laser had actually shot a hole through it. So that's actually a good point that he makes. So the planet was already destabilizing, and yeah, so it was just finishing off, basically.
Of course, that's ignoring the sun disk stuff here for the sake of simplicity and because of how contentious that is. That's a whole other can of worms, so we're going to stick with the usual scaling for this hypothetical. I previously made a video about 50 average Saiyans versus 50 average Viltrumites. I recommend checking that video out too.
It says 50 average Saiyans versus 50 average Viltrumites. I'll actually check that one out because I actually like these analysis.
Because it'll give more context here, but in that video I also discussed how the speeds of the Viltrumites work. They're obviously massively faster than light, however, they can't accelerate to that instantly. But their combat and reaction speeds do scale to wherever their travel speeds go to. And like I mentioned, these 50 Viltrumites are the peak of the peak, so they're even faster than those ones I mentioned.
And Viltrumites don't get tired. Get jobs. I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired. Hey, trying to get it how they live. Hey, but like, they don't get tired or fatigued.
Now we have an idea about the Viltrumites, but what about Frieza's army? How strong is the Frieza force? Frieza's soldiers have a wide variance of powers, and it doesn't really have a specific number of soldiers, though it is at least in the hundreds, if not thousands by this point.
I said the hundreds and thousands.
I started a business to give old clothes a new life,
I try
and
to
Chase
get
has
it how I
supported me from the
live.
beginning.
Hey.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to get into power
presidents.
soldiers, though it is at least in the hundreds, if not thousands by this point. Unfortunately, we're going to have to get into power levels here, which are nice for quick power comparisons within Dragon Ball, but converting them to actual power scaling kind of sucks because they're not linear and they don't capture the full picture of someone's power.
They don't at all, because you can have a base power level that be small, but whenever you charge up your beam, your power level exceeds very high.
That kind of was the whole intent when Toriyama made them. It even gets made fun of in the story itself. Anyways, the average Frieza soldier likely caps out at Raditz's power level. So we could say the grunts, the random nameless soldiers on Namek, were around 1500. And considering how important the mission on Namek was, Frieza brought what were considered good soldiers. So for the sake of this video, let's assume that the average weaker soldier is probably around the level of 900, which is pretty much Goku's peak individual power against Raditz when he was using a Kamehameha. So we can scale it right off the tip. By the way, we're going to work on Dragon Ball manga scaling here, rather than anime stuff.
Okay. Sounds good. I read the manga and I have seen the anime. I want to get the manga. I want to get the full manga set. Now, that's something that I've been looking forward to, is getting the full manga set of Dragon Ball Z. That was my first manga as a kid, is Dragon Ball Z. Actually, I think it was Naruto and Dragon Ball Z was my first show. It's either or. I always get those two flip-flops.
Raditz Saga Goku is planetary level himself, arguably even higher than that because Dragon Ball's Earth is actually bigger than a normal planet. But I digress, let's just keep it simple and say planetary. As for speed,
did he say Dragon Ball's Earth is bigger than the regular planet?
About relativist, but arguably even higher than that because Dragon Ball's Earth is actually bigger than a normal planet. But I digress, let's just keep it simple and say planetary. As for speed, Goku's only about relativistic at combat speed here, and reaction speed as well. With some pretty slow travel speed too. Dragon Ball characters at this point were only about supersonic tier when actually flying, but the reaction and combat speeds are more important here. So all of this applies to the average run-of-the-mill Frieza Force soldier. But the Frieza Force obviously has a couple higher-ranking soldiers too. Of course, there are the three Saiyans: Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta.
Okay, yeah, I said they definitely gonna... Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta alone, Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta alone would be more than enough for the Viltrumites. I hate to say it. Even though Death Battle wanted to scale Bardock to be weaker than Omni-Man for whatever reason, Death Battle literally hates Dragon Ball because the Saiyans alone would take on the Viltrum. And if Bardock is the same power level as King Vegeta, and King Vegeta had a power level of 10,000, I think, at the time, why would, do you see what I'm saying? 10,000 times 50, 500,000 in Super Saiyan form. Why would Omni-Man be able to take on King Vegeta if King Vegeta was blowing up 3 planets at once? And it took 3 Viltrumites to blow up the damn planet. Now, I literally want you guys to sit here and ponder this for a second. If King Vegeta was scaled to a level 10,000 and Bardock was the same power level as King Vegeta, and King Vegeta could blow up 3 planets all at once, why do you think that Omni-Man, who needed 3 Viltrumites to destabilize the planet and fly through it, would scale to King Vegeta? Why would Bardock even lose that battle? Death Battle is so wrong in that instance. If Vegeta's dad, King Vegeta, is blowing up planets, but it takes 3 Viltrumites to blow up 1 planet that was destabilized. So if the planet wasn't destabilized by that space gun ray, it would have completely they would have just crashed into it. It wouldn't have destroyed it. So if King Vegeta can do that feat, why would Omni-Man be able to defeat him? Because, it makes no sense. But, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. So...
who are 1,500, 4,000, and 18,000 respectively for their power level.
Look, I said 15,000. Look, 18,000, 1,500, and 4,000.
Though the former two do vary sometimes. Vegeta, on the other hand, is solid at 18,000, and that is a pretty definite power level. These 3 could also turn into Great Apes and multiply their power tenfold. There are also soldiers like Apul who fight warrior Namekians, so his power's in the couple thousand since the Namekian warriors have powers of 3,000 as well. Okay. A few members like him exist. Some are even of the same race, but I'd only assume a handful of warriors are in this range. Then there are people like Kui, who's also at 18,000, and it's safe to assume that a few like him exist, but probably single digits if anything. He and Vegeta were pretty exceptional. And there's also Frieza's right-hand man, Zarbon and Dodoria, the strongest of them at 23,000 and 22,000 respectively.
Okay, 23,000 and 22,000. So that's why Vegeta was able to hang with them. And then Zarbon in his boosted form was like 30,000 or something crazy.
Finally, Frieza himself, though he rarely does the dirty work. 530,000 in his first form, up to 150 million at full power. A huge range. Now, everybody else I just listed is just varying levels of large planetary. Again, power levels aren't linear, so
Did they just
differences
say that
listed
his
is
power
up
level
to
was
150 million at full-
120 million in full power Frieza? Holy fuck! Good lord. But y'all be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Sheesh. Good lord.
A huge range. Now, everybody else I just listed is just varying levels of large planetary. Again, power levels aren't linear, so differences in power levels aren't exactly multiplicative.
Yeah.
Though, as for Frieza himself, he's obviously way beyond that level. First form Frieza is a small star buster, while at full power, he buffs all the way up to large star level. Thankfully, unlike Invincible power scaling, I feel like a lot of people easily agree on where all these characters fall in terms of their destructive capabilities. The higher echelon of Frieza Force soldiers are faster than light, but not by a significant margin like the Viltrumites. Though, once you get to Frieza himself, he does go into the massively faster than light territory. Probably still not on the level of the Viltrumites, but still incredibly quick. Raditz and Goku on their own are at least...
Bro, why does he scale the Viltrumites to be so fast, bro? I don't know why the Viltrumites are scaled so fast in the salad bars rankings, but I don't think the Viltrumites are that fast, and I genuinely think that the Dragon Ball Z characters are moving a bit quicker than he thinks when he scales it. But to each his own.
Planetary, so that sets a solid floor. This means Raditz, one of the weakest among the named Frieza Force soldiers, is stronger than the best Viltrumites. And the average schmucks that are part of the army and don't even have names are probably still stronger than the Viltrumites, at least when it comes to attack power and durability. But in case you haven't already noticed, there's a pretty huge caveat: speed. Dragon Ball doesn't get into that massively faster than light territory until later on. Well, besides Frieza, he is in that realm. Granted, the Viltrumites also do need to accelerate to get there, and they usually won't fight at these speeds on a planet because, first of all, it's easier to fly in the vacuum of space, and second of all, at least in Mark's case, you're going to be damaging stuff around you and you don't want to do that. And I doubt they'd want to fight at their fullest speed on planet Viltrum because they would be destroying their own home. But, even with this speed advantage, what is speed going to do when everyone else outclasses your strength? Sure, against the weaker Frieza Force soldiers, it could make up for the gaps. But like, even when you're getting to Raditz level, the gap between him and the average Viltrumite is going to be so large that you can't simply make it up by being really fast and speed blitzing.
I said they're going to speed blitz and they're going to punch Raditz and then they're going to split in half because that's how fast they're going. So if I had to guess what would happen between a fight between Viltrumites and Saiyans, they would be going so fast because this is how he's scaling it, that they would try to punch a Saiyan, but the Saiyans are so dense and so durable that they would split in half or they would break all their bones.
Unless you catch the soldiers off guard, but knowing that they're basically invading a planet full of knockoff Saiyans, they're probably going to be careful. Not to mention, while a lot of the weaker Frieza Force soldiers don't have unique abilities, the stronger ones are shooting Ki Blast, and some of them even have other techniques, so they have a lot at their disposal. They have more versatile skill sets, and this isn't even considering that Frieza could call in the Ginyu Force. I just don't...
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, he wouldn't need to call in the Ginyu Force. That would be a waste of his time and the Ginyu Forces.
think they'd be necessary here. I think just with his regular soldiers, particularly a couple strong ones like the Saiyans and maybe like Qui, Zarbon, and Dodoria, this planet would be a little bit tougher to take over than normal, but Frieza wouldn't suffer any major losses and he would win in the end. Even with the gap in speed, I don't see any way for the Viltrumites to win. But they're not going to be killed either. The whole point of Frieza taking the planet over is, first of all, to keep the planet for himself. He's not going to destroy it. I feel like the planet would be somewhat valuable so he could flip it and sell it. Or just keep the Viltrumites on it like he did with Planet Vegeta, and keep them essentially as soldiers.
With Google Play
Sure,
Games, you can play
I would do.
Unlocked. Unlock bigger screens.
But that's where we get into the next part of this video, the what if section. What would happen next? Well, that's where things get interesting.
I said, what would happen next? So like I said Frieza would definitely keep the Viltrumites on to replace the Saiyans to invade planets. That's what I would think.
It's not just as straightforward as the Viltrumites become soldiers and that's it. There's a lot of variables to consider. Naturally, Frieza would probably want to use them as soldiers. Of course, if he wanted to kill them, he could do so. If we frame this as a deathmatch, the Frieza Force very clearly wins and kills all the Viltrumites. Frieza could do this alone with barely any effort. Just a couple Ki blasts from Frieza and boom, he's done. The Viltrumites are similar to Saiyans and love to fight anyways. Plus, he can control them due to having stronger soldiers already, and he would be offering them work. For now, they'd probably acquiesce for their survival, and also because this isn't exactly a bad deal for them. They're going to be part of a large army, get better protection. They're going to be getting paid to fight. So it's not really a terrible predicament, but
You know what I mean? But that was their whole manifest destiny for the Oh my god, the Viltrums are America. Holy shit, Viltrumite are the Americans. Manifest destiny. Except they're trying to manifest destiny the entire universe. Which is crazy, but manifest destiny.
It will be a huge blow to their pride. And of course, they're not going to get complacent and be Frieza's minions forever. Long term, they'd plan to take over, or rebel somehow, and it might be possible. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to drop a like and hype
What, you think that they would try to team up with the Saiyans?
points on the video because it really does help out the channel. And I make videos like this a lot, so if you want to see more, well, that's why the subscribe feature's there. Either way, I appreciate you watching. So what happens when they're assimilated into the Frieza Force? First off, they would get introduced to Frieza's tech. While the Viltrumites had their own advanced tech, this would maybe cause some other developments. Scouters are very helpful, for example, as well as healing pods.
So, one, they would be able to determine the power levels of their weakest and get rid of the weakest easier that way.
Viltrumites can already heal themselves, but imagine having the healing pods that the Saiyans and Frieza's soldiers could use. This would accelerate it greatly, and let them grow a lot faster after battle. They'd also become aware of ki attacks. At first, they'd probably use energy weapons like weaker Frieza soldiers, or not even rely on that, maybe just preferring their usual combat. But eventually, the best warriors would adapt and develop energy blasts, seeing how helpful they are. Since we're assuming they're
Oh, so we're going to assume that the Viltrumites get energy blast and ki blast. That's interesting.
in the same verse here, ki will be something that can be harnessed by them. And with how great they already are as warriors, they probably have some latent ki within there. As they fight more and more and heal faster, they grow stronger and stronger. It doesn't seem to help them grow as rapidly as Saiyans, but it's still growth. And once they get ki, their abilities skyrocket even further. Over time, the Viltrumites will get too strong. They're smart though, and they're likely going to keep a low profile, just to not show Frieza their true power. If anything, I feel like the three Saiyans will become allies to them. They went through similar things with Frieza, and they're pretty similar species too.
Oh, so they would team up with the Saiyans and then try to take over with Frieza? Or take over against Frieza?
Vegeta might even warn the Viltrumites of what's to come. This is where things ramp up. Vegeta doesn't care for the Viltrumites, but he would respect them as warriors, and also, they could make for useful allies in the meantime. They'll overthrow Frieza together. That's the plan. Perhaps Vegeta can even go to Earth and retrieve Raditz' brother, but he's a weakling, so maybe that's not necessary. The Viltrumites and the three Saiyans form a loose alliance, training, growing, and hiding their power. But just because they're working alongside each other, doesn't mean Vegeta will view them as equals. He still will want to remain above them, so he, Nappa, and Raditz will do everything they can to stay ahead. Eventually it reaches a tipping point, and there are two outcomes here. One, they attack Frieza in his first form, unaware of his other powers. Or two, they wait a really long time and grow really far, ensuring victory no matter what.
Oh, so they would say that they would continue to work under Frieza's subjugation and they would keep using the Zenkai boost in order for them to get strong enough to make sure that they kill Frieza outright. So Vegeta would turn Super Saiyan eventually.
In the first scenario, they could overthrow Frieza's army and form a joint Saiyan Viltrumite alliance. But there's two big issues there, besides Frieza himself. The Ginyu Force and King Cold could still attack. Now, if they're
Oh, yeah, that is true.
strong enough to fight First Form Frieza, the Ginyu Force wouldn't be too much of a problem. Though if their entire collective power is needed to kill Frieza, the Ginyu Force would be an issue. But if they're a lot stronger on average, then that doesn't really matter. King Cold is still a problem though too, essentially another Frieza, even if he's not the same strength as Frieza's full power. And that's another thing, Frieza would still be hiding his full power. If they somehow catch Frieza off guard and kill him in his first form, that's great, but they're still King Cold. Plus, if they don't destroy Frieza completely, he can be rebuilt. The chances for total victory in this scenario are pretty low.
Like, absolutely low. They wouldn't be able to pull it off unless Vegeta turned Super Saiyan.
Especially because they might not even be able to kill Frieza right away. If he transforms, which is pretty likely, then they're screwed. But let's say they bide their time for a while, growing so strong together that even if they fight Frieza at his full power, they could overcome him. Despite not knowing the extent of Frieza's power, let's say they grow until their powers are in the millions. They want to be extra sure they can win. 50 Viltrumites plus 3 Saiyans that can go Grade Ape would be more than enough to kill Frieza, as long as their own power levels are in the millions. Let's say they train and grow until they're around 3 million each, making for a collective 150 million power level for the Viltrumites and a 90 million power level for the 3 Saiyans after they go Grade Ape.
Why would it be a 90 million? Because, oh yeah, times 10 multiplier. But why wouldn't Vegeta be able to turn Super Saiyan by this point?
Or 9 million in their base. Since the power's collective, it's not a guaranteed victory as Frieza can divide and conquer. But all their collective power, channeled into one combined attack, could win. Though the time needed to reach a power like this would be pretty long, and I feel like at some point Frieza would get suspicious. Like, no matter how well they hide their powers, it's going to be really hard to keep this under wraps for 53 people, especially 53 people that Frieza already doesn't like too much. Not to mention, an alliance between the Viltrumites and the Saiyans would be very volatile to begin with. In the first scenario where they attack First Form Frieza, victory is very unlikely unless they insta-kill him in his first form.
They're not going to do that. The Saiyans are too battle hungry and too battle lust driven.
It's a low diff for Frieza if he transforms or when King Cold gets involved. In the second, victory is a lot more attainable, unless they let Frieza go full power, which probably would happen because they would want to have the best combat possible. In that case, it's a very high diff victory for the Saiyan Viltrumite alliance. But what comes next? A civil war. The Saiyans and Viltrumites won't share power. If they do, it'll be short-lived. More variables happen here. On one hand, the 50 Viltrumites outnumber the 3 Saiyans. However, since Saiyans seem to grow much more from training and healing compared to Viltrumites, and grow a lot faster too, these 3 would likely be ahead of the Viltrumites and not equal like I assumed before. So their powers probably wouldn't be even, especially with the Saiyans already being ahead to begin with.
Because they do get a stronger Zenkai boost because that's their natural healing. So Saiyans get stronger after combat, but Viltrumites, they just don't get tired from combat. So the Saiyans would be growing a bit quicker, so I could see that.
Considering we said these Viltrumites would be weaker than the Raditz on average to start with, let's say Vegeta does everything to maintain his power gap between them, a power gap of about 20 times, just as a rough estimate. So while the Viltrumites are 1 million power in each, Vegeta would be more like 20 million, rather than equal. In Grade 8, 200 million. One Vegeta could take on about 20 Viltrumites, and transformed, he no diffs them.
So Vegeta would be able to take on Final Form Frieza in Grade 8.
Plus, a war could trigger an awakening for Vegeta. Here's how I see it going. The Viltrumites try and divide and conquer, jumping Nappa and Raditz. They're attacked by groups of Viltrumites, and the Viltrumites prevent them from going Grade 8, killing them with high difficulty. Then Vegeta's targeted. They know to not fight near a moon or let Vegeta make one. Push to the brink, and with Raditz and Nappa already defeated, plus Vegeta having already been on edge for so long, that could all make the perfect storm for Vegeta to go Super Saiyan, especially with all the extra training he's done. In this form, he would defeat the Viltrumites with ease. Even if the power gap is smaller, and even if
Yeah!
they're all equal.
That times 50 multiplier, boy. He got 20 million times 50. Like, I can't do math. That is 100 million? A billion? I don't know.
Vegeta would win if he goes Super Saiyan. Super Saiyan makes him exactly 50 times stronger. So if Vegeta's base is equal to the average Viltrumite, going Super Saiyan would exactly let him match 50 Viltrumites at once.
But why would he be the same strength? You just said that he was going to be 20 times stronger than them.
And that's their collective power, so it's going to make it even easier to kill them, since he could also divide and conquer. Though, if it ever gets to this point of a civil war, I feel like that scenario I outlined is the most likely. But if the 3 Saiyans fought together, I think the Saiyans could still take it with mid-difficulty. Though there is a chance the Viltrumites come out victorious, it's just not as high as the Saiyans becoming victorious. Either way, my view is that, at the end of everything, either everyone dies and Frieza remains in power, or the second likely option is that all the Viltrumites die, and maybe even Raditz and Nappa, but Vegeta remains in power.
I said, all hail Plankton. I'm playing. I said, King Vegeta. I said, the prince of all 13 Saiyans. I'm playing. Of 2 Saiyans. I said, because it would be Goku and Vegeta. 2.5 Saiyans. I said, this was a good analysis, though. I actually like it. So to summarize everything, the Viltrumites wouldn't do very well against Frieza, and after they took over the Viltrumite Empire, the Saiyans and Viltrums would team up and essentially try to overthrow Frieza. That sounds pretty accurate to me. I can't even be mad at that. I can't even be mad at that.
Shame me? Y'all niggas can't shame me. Y'all don't know I don't give a fuck already. Y'all can't shame my nigga. Y'all got me fucked up.
What's your name?